The town of Auroville near Pondicherry, known for its sense of unity and community living, has descended into chaos over the last couple of days. Auroville is an experimental township located mostly in Tamil Nadu's Viluppuram district with some parts in Puducherry. It was founded in 1968 by Mira Alfassa, known as the Mother, and designed by architect Roger Anger. Auroville is a universal town where people of all countries live together, irrespective of their creeds, politics, and nationalities. It currently has a population of about 3,000 people. The administration's move to construct a 4-kilometer road within the township to connect all 4 of its zones has led to clashes between certain sections of residents and the administration. The township feels that the new road will throw out of balance the existing ecology. The administration, on the other hand, is of the view that the road plan named Crown Project was envisaged by Alfassa and that cut trees can be replanted elsewhere within the township.
There's many different views on how we proceed forward with development in Auroville, and in the past the dream catching had been used as a way of catching and weaving together these views. When the current issue around how do we move forward with the Crown, which is development of a sort of inner movement space within Auroville, a road, a street, however, came up, David and Omar saw that this could be a potential way to bring all those different stakeholders, all those different people with different views, different ideas together, and actually get some of the architects involved in trying to see actually all these different perspectives that are held towards architecture. Again, how can these weave a little bit more together to find something that's really aligned with Auroville's aspiration for working together in harmony.
It's a fantastic opportunity to build a city fully woven in a very beautiful ecosystem without losing the essence. And that's for me the key. If we accept that key and try to understand the essence of the concept, and we understand that in most cases there is no need of conflict between the essence of the concept and the ecosystem, and there will be some cases in which you have to choose, but in most cases no. Then it's a beautiful design process that is based on collaboration and imagination and creativity and not conflict.
I just felt so much positivity, not only from me, like from my own self. I felt like this is something I can stand behind, but just everywhere we went, like suddenly, slowly, there was this kind of feeling that there's some hope. And I think this is a law of life, when there are two extremes, something extra, some third thing has to emerge. I wouldn't say neutral, but something that is completely, not this or that. And this dream weaving kind of just provided that space, and it just emerged. That's the best thing, it was not pre-planned.
I see fantastic enthusiasm for the process that has been set in place now. And I see a common direction coming out of this, emerging out of this process. And that's very important now that if you're talking about a participatory planning system, then how do you get this in place is a very important aspect. How do you carry everybody together? Because any planning process is a complicated process, because it's the dreams, aspirations, and hopes of the existing community. And they're also setting up precedents for the community as it grows, of people who will come by in the future and the kinds of aspirations they will have. And their children, of course, children and grandchildren, because communities proliferate over time.
Crown is what I call the artery of Auroville. If we see the Matramandir as the soul, and that artery is 4.4 kilometers around, a circle, roughly a circle. It links together the 4 zones, residential, cultural, international and industrial zone, but it's also the link between the zones and the peace area where the Matramandir is. It has multiple functions that need to be integrated and need to be woven together for it to be successful. One of the problems over the years is we've started referring to it as the Crown Road. But actually the problem by doing that, obviously we need some means of moving around the Crown, and so a road would be the most obvious thing to do. But by focusing on this Crown Road, we've moved away from asking ourselves what the Crown itself is meant to accomplish. And by building a circular Crown Road to link all these things together, there's a danger that it creates a barrier from the outer 4 zones to the inner peace area. The idea is, of course, we need to relook at this. We need to actually say, well, how do we move ahead with development and maintain the highest vision for what the Crown can be, and not simply build what could ultimately be the lowest common denominator, because that's the easiest thing to do and it's the only thing we can figure out today. We do this, but by doing that, the danger is that we block future development in a deeper, wider, richer sense.
A DDP is a detailed development plan. At the moment, Auroville has the Galaxy concept, which is a sort of conceptual model, and it has the master plan, which is very detailed about sort of roads and where they will go. But it doesn't really have anything to move forward from that. So the detailed development plan is that next step. It actually kind of says, okay, this is what's going to happen in this area, and it allows people to move forward by putting in pipes, or if they're putting a building, they know what's going to be going next to it, so they can plan ahead for that. So it's really needed to be able to move forward.
DreamWeaving had been used to do the master plan for the Sustainable Livelihood Institute, and the Secretary saw this as an interesting avenue to explore within the Auroville context, so she wanted to meet me to understand a bit more about dream catching, dream weaving, what that was, what that is, and if that would be a possibility to help explore the master plan in more general terms, but the Crown at least to start with.
Now, when that happened, we were very hesitant. I was very hesitant to start. David was very hesitant to start. We were actually going for no. We are not going to participate in this. But then things were escalating,
But as the youth centre got cleared, and then the Darkali started to be cleared, obviously the need for some kind of process to look at what that might look like became more and more important.
But we have to try to do it as a group of independent architects in Auroville who don't belong to any group, except we are only under the resident assembly.
Then we called a gathering in the Unity Pavilion of the community, and we did a presentation explaining what DreamWeaving was, what the proposal was, and the timescale, and we basically asked for a show of hands from the people present. It was very important to us to get a sense that the community, or a significant portion of the community, were behind us actually doing this. We didn't want to, with the tensions that were in the air at the time, we weren't interested in just forging ahead, believing that this was the right thing to do.
What we are asking is just to know if, based on the process, not the content, the process is the DreamWeaving, the process is the date that we have presented right now. Do you like this process or not?
Yeah. Are you happy for us to try it?
We got that show of hands. It was probably not unanimous, but it was certainly overwhelming.
When we were asked to sort of, take up this assignment, we were introduced to David, and David made a presentation about how they'd been going about dream catching and dream weaving. And I thought that's a fantastic way to go about actually having a community outreach and community participation. I sort of grabbed at the chance and said, hey, listen, can we make this as part of the process? And so I wasn't very sure at that point how this would sort of pan out, but it's been fantastic. It's been really, really a dream.
A lot of people have the sense that dream catching is about your dream or my dream, but it's not that. Of course, it's hard to distinguish, but at the end of the day, we were clearly saying, look, this is Mother's dream, and Mother's dream for what Auroville might be. Dream catching is interesting in itself because the model allows for anybody to take part. It's not just for architects, whereas the dream weaving itself is really just for people who can design.
People who have certain technical knowledge and expertise can come together and try and weave their projections, whatever they want to express through their knowledge. I mean, in this case, of course, we had architects coming up with designs for the crown, and then they could sit together and say, okay, what do we like from each other's designs? How do we weave that into a design, or what we can take from others and put it in our design?
So we were looking at how can we take that dream weaving and then expand the circle again to include other people. Omar again was working on a sort of diagram where we would have the dream weaving as one of the core pieces of that. But then there was what we ended up calling the technical team, whether it's water experts, infrastructure experts, but also all the different planning expertise that we have in Auroville. That already created a very interesting dynamic between these two, so that the idea would be that they would feed in information, the dream weavers would be coming up with designs using a lot of that information, and then over the course of the process there would be feedback rounds between those.
Imagine if instead we bring together ordinary people from all walks of life. These people are selected randomly, like a jury, so that they're impartial and representative. They have honest conversations and find common grounds on the actions we need to take. This is an approach known as a citizens' assembly, and it's gaining popularity all around the world as a way to solve tough problems that politicians can't.
With the Citizens' Assembly, you have randomly selected people and they look at the issues, and the purpose of that is to try and make sure that there's no people coming with strong views trying to sort of push the discussion or the debate in one way or another. With that, you normally have the experts or the presenters representing all the different perspectives, because they're normally the ones that hold this. With this, we felt there was something different because it's an issue that impacts the whole community, and some of them have very strong views and opinions. So we saw that actually, as well as having this kind of non-biased group who represent the entire community, it was also important to have in the discussions some of those who have strong perspectives from different areas of the community. So we kind of brought all of those together, but we managed to hold it with the same principles that we have with the Citizens' Assembly of being respectful, allowing everybody to speak, honouring that everybody has a different perspective, and we're not trying to shift anybody necessarily. We're just trying to see, is there something higher that can emerge that sort of brings together or weaves together all of these different aspects.
People like me who work for Auroville, we never get a chance to involve with these kind of activities. So first day for me it was a little bit confused, okay. Then I listen just 1 hour and I just observe other people. Everyone is same like me. There is nothing special. There is I felt equality, so that's very important. I was really excited to continue this. And end of this session, I got more clarity about Auroville, what is crown, what's a galaxy.
We also had been asked by Vesta Shilpa Foundation, who are the people who the outcomes, the report will go to really help them understand what's the poetry of Auroville. You know, they can come and they can see and they can read reports and they can look at master plans, but what's really important to Auroville, you know, it's something that's a different place, it's a spiritual city. People come here for very specific reasons. So we also felt that by having a group of randomly selected participants, it would enable to really go deep into that aspect. So not just those who are caught up by their views on what should be happening. We also had some people who kind of represented different areas of the community who also will be impacted by development or may have inputs for it, such as artists, economy, education.
This is some kind of a very lifetime experience, having so many architects who have a very good understanding of Auroville, you know, who are not like also new, but rich experience here. And they've also used the plans that have been worked by other architects in the past. So they have taken as a guidance and worked to it. So it's really, we can't imagine this kind of a work being done, you know, the effort that they really put and going into very detail, you know, to see what is existing and what needs to come. So this all is a very good planning process. So I'm really happy to be this part of the process.
First Citizens' Assembly was about research, and it was particularly answering a question of how can there be a participatory community process, and what is the framework, or what could be a framework for that. The goal for the last Citizens' Assembly with the DreamWeaving was completely different, because the goal was very clear that we had to produce this output for the Vesta Shilpa consultants, and also the time constraint was quite obvious. We had a time frame in which we had to do this, and the third thing is also the integration of the DreamWeaving model within the Citizens' Assembly model, which was very interesting.
We all have seen the Citizens' Assembly work. They are seen as more neutral than almost any other group, or most groups. And this is the kind of spirit that was needed for the DreamWeaving, not to have anybody that it is seen as either true or not, but it's seen as part of lobbying or part of of the groups leading to the current tension in Auroville, let's say, while the Citizen Assembly team and coordination team are actually seen as a bridging team who bring people from all kinds of colors in Auroville, well, randomly, so it has to be, and being able to establish a very positive and a very beautiful vibe between everyone.
We wouldn't have had that possibility to hold this together if we didn't have this solid support at the back. And Citizens Assembly is just such a group of dynamic people, especially women, young, and they've already worked together. The first meeting I entered, it was like such a strong team space and so organized. You know, they take up responsibility, people, you know, step in for each other when it's necessary. So that was such a support.
Why we came together was also because we wanted to learn. And that was very clear from the very beginning that all of us want to learn about the governance system of Auroville, of finding a process that actually works. So it's probably one of the groups where we don't try and enforce or impose our opinion, because we are very open. We receive whatever is there, and also we receive something which probably doesn't come from any of us, and we try to receive something from outside. And so it's a very dynamic, fluid team, and it's been a joy to work with everyone.
But we're trying to use this opportunity, this sort of storm that's been thrown up, to move forwards together. And when we're not able to stop either, we don't know if JCBs are going to go again. We tried early on to say we can only do this if there are no JCBs, but we don't know. We're not in a position to guarantee anything. And just for the other side, we're not in a position to guarantee whether the Green Tribunal continues or whether other avenues continue. So we're standing in this, trying to stand in this calm middle.
A good brief is always not stopping innovation. A good brief is always opening innovation. So the complexity here was how to open innovation with these constraints. And some of them are very reasonable, but some of them are not sensible.
When this idea of bringing together architects in Auroville to work on this was put forth, this need for a brief was obvious. And at that point, I think the TDC was supposed to come up with a brief, and then they had discussions, or they were not able to do that.
And we were actually waiting for a brief from L'Avenir for 2 or 3 months, and it never came. And it was at that time, actually, it was around that time then that the youth centre did get raised. And so then the question is, well, how do we move on? It's very important that a collective process like DreamWeaving is done in a peaceful atmosphere. So we were trying to imagine, well, even if this brief comes, or if we do write this brief together with L'Avenir, how do we even invite people to be part of a collective process? It's all volunteers. People aren't being paid to do it. And so if there's a lot of tension in the community, then nobody's going to step forward to take part in this process. So it was actually rather interesting that at the same time, the Green Tribunal created the stay order, because that actually, no matter how one looks at it, positively or negatively, it created a peaceful atmosphere within which to do the DreamWeaving. It was actually Omar who helped to write the brief, both with Srivatsa from L'Avenir and with Vastu Shilpa, who by that time were already also on the scene, as it were, in the picture.
And the process that we are following is ideal. The dream catchers, for example, everybody participates and everybody gives ideas, and slowly an image comes. In planning, this is really how it happens. Ideas don't come suddenly. When they come, they are not homogeneous. Sometimes they are not harmonious. sometimes they are contradictory, but over discussions, because we are talking about lifestyle, we are talking about we are living, etc., economies, realities, social conditions, and we take time. But in the end, this group idea, working together is very good because everybody feels responsible and a lot of new ideas come.
The architects or the community here should be able to give some input about what is life here and what are we here for. So the brief was predominantly about that and of course outlining what is the need for this work right now, which highlighted the galaxy vision, the master plan perspective 2025, the main documents, and then highlighted 12 design challenges, starting from finding a synthesis between the galaxy vision and the master plan. There were factors about bioclimatic design, an urban farm. There was one about water. There was one about scale and proportions. There was one about mobility.
And moving from there into an exploration, and of course each architect brings their own way of doing that. Some people are more focused on design aspects, some people are more focused on the practical aspects and so forth. We got a very interesting overview from the different architects already just by doing that. But they just started with all those documents and sort of saw where they went from there.
So it was about finding the right wording, basically. So, for example, the master plan as a gazetted is written in the brief that it is accepted as the starting point, of course. But the aim is not the master plan. This is not the end of the process. This is accepted as a starting point. Understanding is flexibility, which if you read the master plan document, it actually very open document that opened the door to respect the realities on the ground and to study and to even modify the document. Take this to the original vision, which was very clear in the physical model prepared between 66 and 68. And to hold to that essence, basically, while respecting realities on the ground.
When it goes to parks, and this is what I feel sometimes missing, when it goes to park, you find an indication of continuity of water, and when we work on concept design, we make these assumptions. It doesn't mean necessarily there will be water exactly here, but it means continuity of the ecosystem. And when you work in places like this, you have to establish double continuity of the crown experience and continuity of the ecosystem. And see, this is the kind of sensibility that it is needed when you approach a problem like this, not to cancel the continuity of the crown experience, but also not to cancel the continuity of the ecosystem, and not to see them as opposed to each other. Instead, to see them as for me, it's just a fantastic design challenge.
So from that point on, that was kind of the starting gun, if you like. And so pretty much within 2-3 days, we already did a crown walk at 6 o'clock in the morning with the architects who'd stepped forward to take part. So that was just to get a lay of the land and get a sense of what we're dealing with. So as Lavinia then got together the plans and provided us with the information needed, at least to start sketching, designing and so forth, it slowly sort of built up over the next week or two.
We were not as hopeful when we started as we are now, because there were a lot of questions, doubtful and all these things. But then we went on, because every step of it, every coming together, every meeting that we had with each other, all the discussions gave us a little bit of spark to move forward.
This is something which has to be protected in the city, But it must be safe, of course. You must be able to let down your guard, otherwise you will be overrun by cars or things like this. This is the complete absence of cars. A lot of possibilities can happen on streets. We still call the crown a road. I'm always very much taken aback by it. It still happens today. People talk about the crown road. Yeah, this leads to these wonderful places which are tourist attractions in medieval towns. But unfortunately, the situation in our cities, very much in Indian cities also, although there it is very much on the brink also. This is a shared space. When I look at Gandhi's and Nehru Street in Pondy, it's absolutely amazing what can happen there, because the battle between pedestrians and cars is not yet won by the car, but they fight each other. So something could be done there, and it would be quite an interesting street.
The process itself took place over 2 months. So we started with a series of technical presentations which gave the background, and these were intended to give the architects who were the DreamWeavers the information that they needed to be able to do their task. These were also recorded and live streamed to the wider community because many people are interested in this topic, so it gave this real background for many people.
This is the capital of Kerala. I don't know what the canopy cover is there, but it looks significantly more. Their density is 4,500 people per square kilometer. Here, including the greenbelt. So if we're not separating the city from the greenbelt, we'd be getting 2,500 per square kilometer. So it's just to show that we can have green and we can have people and we can have population.
We were also invited to attend all the lectures that were presented by the experts. And I think that was a good way to understand the various layers that have been part of Auroville since long, and including the amount of work that has been done till now. And it was a good way to look at the knowledge which is existing here. And so it really briefed us.
How many water bodies, how many, all interconnect, how rich is this land? How beautiful is it to have a possibility to integrate water, which is a life-giving gift, into our activities, into our human activities. 1,200 years ago, in Tamil Nadu, there are more than 45,000. In Chennai, there were 186. Today, there are only 26. Can we just learn from the local culture?
And from that, the architects then had 2 or 3 weeks to be working on their designs before they came up with the first weave. So the first weave was sort of them presenting in teams, so 8 or 9 teams presenting, and then getting feedback from other architects on the things that they really liked, things that they would like to copy. And also they could share if there was something that they didn't think would work technically, but not saying, I don't like that because of design standards. But yeah, if they could see there was something that needed to be addressed or improved, then they could give that. So they did that once as a closed session, so that they could just really build that connection with each other and that understanding. And it's also quite a lot to present the first time and get that feedback. So that was a closed session. And then 2 weeks later, they had the first big weave, which was open to all of the participants.
That was the first time where really the Citizens' Assembly truly kicked in with all of its experience with the random selection, helping people. There was even before the session, smaller sessions where randomly selected people could get bias training and see how they're bringing their own perspective and how that can narrow one's understanding of what's being shown and things like this.
One of the things we purposely did in this process, when we looked at the list of people who are sort of experts and people who who maybe had the strong opinions and the people who were kind of representing sectors. We just asked a question around age. There was only sort of 1 or 2 people, maybe under 40, in the list of people that we had there. And we saw that, when we're talking about the future of Auroville and how we want to move forward, we really need to be engaging more of the youth. So in this one, we purposely then looked for some young representatives of different aspects. So younger entrepreneurs, people working in services, younger people working in education, and brought them in, and even some students from the schools. So we weren't sure how that worked, but the engagement was really good, and the feedback from many of the participants was that they'd like to see even more focus on youth in the sessions and decision-making going forward.
The need was to actually bring as many voices as possible to the table. And it would not have been possible to do that with just randomly selected people. More than the community members in general, the technical experts would have a very strong opinion about this. So it was very important that they come to the table and they participate in this, and they are actually able to give feedback. The second was focus groups, which were people from different areas of work, for example, bioregion, education, youth for Auroville, etc., etc. So their interests are also then taken into account. And then, of course, there was the randomly selected group. So I think all of these different groups, they added a layer to the feedback and gave a very specific feedback also from their own perspective, which was very valuable to the architects to understand what the community in general wants, a representation of that, and also specific groups, what are they looking for? And all this feedback really helped the architects to then factor that into their designs.
And this was 2 days. So the first day, again, the architects presented their updated designs. There were 11 teams. And then the next day, we had a chance for all of the participants to engage with the architect teams. They basically went round in small groups. We had sort of technical and peers going round in the morning, and other architects could visit each other's tables and had sort of 15 minutes or so to share their thoughts and their ideas on what they liked and didn't. And then in the afternoon, we had the randomly selected groups, and each one went round all 11 tables. And then following that, the final step, the architects then took all of that information on board, and then they presented their final designs in the last weave. And then the second day, the participants got a chance to just really go a little bit in depth. There was some guided meditation, some way for them to just kind of sit and absorb what they heard and then interact in a much freer way, just going to whichever architects they wanted to, asking questions, listening, looking at the designs. And then after that, they filled in their feedback on which aspects of which designs they liked and why.
Ideally, one would keep going until one had a design that everybody can agree to. Both the timescale and the scale of the work that was being requested, neither of those two things actually allowed us to get to that place.
I think it's very good that time frames are there. That there are limitations in time, but it also needs to be more realistic. There's a lot of architects, there's a lot of input. I think it would need to be much more in sort of smaller chunks. On the other hand, I think it's great that there's so many people, working together, because you get so many, and you see that from the presentations. Every single presentation is different, and it's bringing in a completely different point of view, and that's very important.
And that's the beauty of dream catching and dream weaving. You can actually you can flow with it and grow with it and see what comes in, because there's so much potential with the team. When you allow things, when you create that safe space, there's so much that comes out, and I think that's a very important thing also to say, that what we created was a safe space, and also, like somebody said, it was a healing space, because I think a lot of times we hurt each other a lot, and because we're a small community, we're very critical towards each other, and especially at a time like this when our community is kind of divided in ways of understanding how we want to go ahead. Then I think this space that we created was very healing for some people as well, and maybe for community at large.
There was a lot of listening happening. For the first time in 3 months, I felt like in a place, but not in a space of anxiety or frustration. So I felt really like a space to dream.
The whole process was about weaving, and that's multifold concept. I mean, weaving the ideas coming from the architects in the DreamWeaving team, but also weaving their ideas with the experts who has produced lots of research and has shown all of the research in the first 3 days conference, commencing conference, and weaving the original vision of Auroville with the ecosystem and the realities on the ground. So these are the 3 weaves to me. The process was designed around the architects are proposing an idea, and then they get reflections, and then they modify significantly. So at the end, the work is not representing the architect, the work is actually manifestation of sounds coming from Auroville that goes to the Vastushilpa. And then hopefully the Vastushilpa will come to us for other reflections. It doesn't stop here. If we cannot use that street or use this plaza, then it's not a good quality design, right? At the end, it has to fit the needs of the users.
What stood out was the environmental and ecological concerns that everybody had, and the concerns of social cohesion, tying up the social factors that bring up about community spaces, brings about public spaces. I think these were some things that were common to all of them.
I learn a lot, and I go back to a lot of important things. I read again what Roger Anger envisioned for the galaxy. I read again the chart of Auroville, so it was quite good for me as a Aurovillian also to reconnect with the core of my existence in Auroville.
So our job is to now, the work that the architects have done, we need to put it together somehow and offer it to the Vastushilpa consultants, and also bring it back to the community. It's not easy. It's a lot of information, and the challenge that we have is really how to make it meaningful.
So now we're at a point where we're working on doing a dream space, which will pick out some of the key aspects from the different designs. But the beauty of doing this dream space now is, because we can't have a unified scheme from the architects, but we still want to maintain the aspect of anonymity, because all the architects agreed at the very beginning that the work they're doing, they will not put their name on it, and it's an offering. And so to, again, move away from 6, 8, 10 different presentations, find a way to capture the ideas without having a name or a face to any given idea, and then all of that goes into the final report, along with the feedback from all of the residents and the people who were involved in the process, and that will go to Vastushilpa Foundation to be used in their work on the DDP over the next 9 months. There was the discussion of continuing to use these types of collective processes as the DDP is ongoing. So for right now, the Crown was the focus, but assuming that time and energy and maybe financial support would be there for those architects and for other architects to take part in further dream weavings. One could do it on each of the zones, could do it on the Greenbelt and various things, and that could all continue to help Vastushilpa flesh out and deepen the quality of the DDP that they're doing.
Before I started, I wasn't aware of the beauty that places like Darkali have to offer. Also, so many things about the galaxy plan, which just somehow popped up while working and while listening to each other. How cohesive it is, and yet how we can take out various ways of slowly bringing that cohesivity. How a part and a whole relate to each other, and how they need to relate to each other. How reality and vision both exist and coexist at the same time, and how we have to find paths that kind of bring them together.
So there's several outcomes to the process. I think for some people they expected, okay, there's just going to be one design, one winning design. And maybe at the start of the process, it could have been that we thought that as well. But as it emerged, and as we spoke to the Vastushilpa team who are going to be using the outcomes for the DDP, we saw, okay, that's not really what's needed in this case. It's not one design that's just going to be built there and then that's it. All of the architects were addressing very different aspects of the Crown. So some were looking at mobility, some were looking at the green spaces, some were looking at the built form, and some were sort of looking at how different zones merge into other zones. And so there's so many different aspects that we decided, rather than asking people, okay, which design do you like most, and sort of putting that through as a winning design, to really capture this depth and breadth, we needed to be looking at which ideas spoke to people on different aspects. So, for example, the DDP will look at what the human aspect is like or what water is like. So we were asking people which of the ideas and designs really resonate with you on those design aspects and why. The key output will be the final designs, all 11 of them from the teams, and then a narrative report, which explains both the process and then a summary of all of the feedback from the participants, sort of identifying the key features that they like and why they like those. So it's quite a dense output that will go, but hopefully something really that will give that poetry to Vastushilpa Foundation and that real understanding of what's needed by the community, what our aspirations are, and they can use that to move forward.
And the next thing about challenges is fear. Fear often inhibits us. Fear, do we dare to reach out to our neighbour? Do we dare to reach out to other experts, come together, collaborate, and so forth? But there's also the fear somewhere, and I understand this very well. The people who've lived here the longest, the people who were here at the beginning, a lot of the people who worked with Roger, there's the fear that this vision will be lost. And I fully understand that, I get it. But the danger in this is that if we don't reach out to look for help, to build the vision, we lose the very thing that we're afraid of losing.
A few things that this process did. One of them was to bring out all the information that was just lying, and we were all referring to it while we were fighting and arguing, but nobody really knew what it was. So it brought to the table all those all those studies, all that work that had been done from the people who had been involved in doing this work. And now it's all collected in one place, and those presentations are there, so anybody can go back and refer to them.
Like, this is really big part of the work that is needed to be done. It has already been achieved by many experts in Auroville. Amazingly, they have been doing it as contribution. Like, how many places you can find this, no? You will find lots of studies on planning, lots of studies on regional planning, lots of studies on water, lots of studies on energy and electrical systems. And all of this is brought to them ready. Actually, very high concentration of expertise in Auroville. Almost unusual for 3,000 inhabitants. The closest would be a university. But we don't have all capacities. And this is very important to recognize.
That's been quite a revelation, that how such a small set of small community produces excellence. That's, I think, amazing. From this would emerge not only ideas that would inform the planning process, but also it'll give an idea about short-term goals. I think there's some things, what we call low-hanging fruit. How do we sort of get that quickly so that the enthusiasm continues?
I was amazed at the kind of creativity and also at the amount of time that people put in. So on that I really loved. In terms of ideas, yes, of course, we know in Auroville we are like, very creative, idealist, people who come from so many different backgrounds. So I was quite amazed like how people took a thread and like ran with it, and very different, very diverse. And it was amazing to see that we could create this in such a short time.
The experience a human has got through this process, the opportunities that it gave through this process, is never going to be taken away from me. So same for whomever has participated. That I felt is very much needed for us, and it will reflect somewhere in the progress of Auroville.
So the first design challenge that we asked people to respond to was grounding the vision. So this was how much it synthesized and grounded the principles of the master plan and the essence of the 1968 vision model known as the Galaxy. So in this one, the idea or design that resonated with most of the respondents was the need for sensitivity to an integration of context and ground realities, such as the bioregion and the canyons. And reasons given for this were that if we can synthesize this, people and nature, in a practical way, then we can start work immediately. So the second design challenge that people responded to was the human experience. This is really about how we create spaces for meaningful human experiences on a social, a cultural, and a spiritual level. So here, the idea that resonated most strongly with most people was really around this creation of safe and inclusive spaces and paths. Noted quite a lot was for children and for elderly, but also for everyone. And again, reasons for this were to keep safe the youth that never ages. So this was asking people to think about how we can offer a diversity of experiences, yet retain continuity on the crown. Looking at things like different zones, times of day and year, and visual interest. So here specifically, what came up most was really this need for this variety of experiences, zones, buildings, materials, widths, and landscaping. And reason given for this was really to create rich experience, a living expression of Auroville's unity in diversity. The next design challenge was around dimensions and proportions, so trying to find creative solutions for these challenges of width and scale on and along the crown. And here the idea or design that resonated most with people was about the need for the crown to change width according to the surroundings in order to minimize the impact in sensitive areas, help to kind of reduce and manage the traffic, and reduce monotony. The reasons given for this were to create a range of experiences and to enable the crown to really have this sense of breathing in and breathing out. So the next design challenge was around mobility, connections and permeability. So looking at how we really solve those challenges of Auroville, how we move around to enable sustainable conscious movement. So here the top idea that sort of resonated most was around the need for public transport systems, these electric shuttles, electric buses, etc. And reasons given for this were around the fact that it could be an immediate action, and it would help to reduce traffic, change mobility habits, and increase social interaction. So the next design challenge was the bioclimatic principles in urban form, so designing with the sun, the wind, the topography, water flow, flora and fauna of the region. So very strongly, this one came very strongly across all the groups, was the need for the shade throughout the day and across the whole year, from trees, buildings on stilts, overhangs, orientation, and other structures. So the next design challenge was around water, so how we consider the flows of water as a solution for our water security, as well as a spatial experiential element. So here again, there was really strong resonance across all of the groups for prioritizing the creation and conservation of water catchment areas. And this came across in many ways, in systems integrated into buildings in urban form in a joyful way, prioritizing the natural water catchment areas. So the next design challenge was around city of nature, so the integration of the built spaces, both solids and voids, with natural ecosystems. So here, the idea that resonated most was this need to really synthesize city and nature. So people responded saying that they saw nature and city as inseparable and wanted to see an ever-changing interaction of built-up green, blue spaces.
From a point in the community where everything was quite bleak and people were full of anger and frustration, and I mean at that point it was very hard to understand what would be the next step for anybody, to a point where there was a lot of creativity, expression of what could be, and also a lot of joy and laughter and some hope. I think there's been some considerable progress, and where now this goes is something we have to see, but I think it has value for the community to come together and to work on something positive and not just talk about it. That has immense value. So.
It was an interesting experience for me this time, because before, when we'd been doing a citizens' assembly, we had a sort of model that had been used elsewhere, and we were trying to replicate that and adjust it a little bit for Auroville. With this time, it was quite different. We were bringing together a model that had previously been used, the DreamWeaving in Auroville, and blending that with the citizens' assembly, and this hadn't been done anywhere in the world before. So it was really an experiment, but I feel that we managed to evolve a process that, with some further tweaking and some refining, could be used in many areas in Auroville and elsewhere.
If we see the openness to people working together on common designs, it's kind of a no-brainer for a place which has been founded on the concept of human unity, that we find ways to work together to manifest it. By investing time in these processes, you actually get buy-in from the participants and from the wider community, which ultimately, in my view, speeds up the implementation later. So my hope would be that we realize the need for it, and we realize that it is an investment of time and energy which ultimately saves a lot of time and energy further down the road. It's impossible for me to imagine the integral yoga being connected to anything that's short-sighted. There's no argument, in my view, to go for anything that isn't that. because it's giving us the depth, and it's giving us the richness, and it's giving us the quality that we're actually looking for.
And then all of this to me concludes into one simple hope. With all of this data collected, with all of this work, and this is my last hope here, is that we shift from this conflict-based narrative, because I'm a designer, I cannot see things in any different way. For us, it's always, there's function and there's form. You do form, function is not working, you do function, form is not working and is not so beautiful, and then you do both, and then suddenly there's no good structure, and it's so complex how to get all together, how to integrate. Design is by default is a profession to integrate. And I wonder, when are we going to leave from this conflict narrative to enjoy? There is an ecosystem, there's social conditions, there's topography, there is a vision. Why don't we just enjoy making them work together? And this is my last hope, is that we all shift, and there is a recognition, a total recognition, that we shift from this to that different place in which let's enjoy, integrate, right?
Yeah, I really think that if this becomes a blueprint for something longer and larger in Auroville, I think we really have something in hand which a lot of people in many parts of the world would be very happy to see. So that's my dream. I think that we can do it. I think that if we, the DDP, the Detailed Development Plan that Vastushilp is hopefully going to take on board for the whole of Auroville, I hope that they will use this as a tool to take, to really bring down how to bring down this amazing galaxy, plan that we have, a master plan, and this image, or, whatever. People have all different kinds of interpretations of it, how to get it onto the ground without losing, what it represents for us. That if we can manage to do it in a level which is aspirational, which is idealist, but yet grounded. This is always the struggle, how to bring it in a way that is true to Auroville, true to what we stand for.
When we counted those who have participated in DreamWeaving actively, either as organizers, designers, experts, focus group, randomly selected, peers, it comes close to 100. The narrative about Auroville is they cannot work together, they're always in conflict. In very small cases, it's true. In the majority of cases, when you look at the middle of Auroville, good people with high capacities, with lots of will to contribute in full service, and we just wanted to shake this false narrative, let's say. Instead, we have the right to create our own narrative. And the whole process was about this.
If you think of the aim of Auroville, it's all about all of us coming together and be filled with self-giving. And that self-giving and that wholeness of self-giving gives birth to this collective realization, to this fraternity of collaboration. So what's been wonderful is to see the level of collaboration with all the people.
This is really significant. I mean, imagine if after 1 year, 1.5 years, we have a working DDP that links the vision and the ground the vision. Many of our problems will not exist anymore. We are in a much better place.
But more importantly, it would be about a process of how people participated. And that in itself would be a great beacon for the ways that towns and cities grow. Because I think one of the things that misses out, the present planning process misses out, is completely involving people in a manner that actually gets implemented.
We need a process that allows envisioning as separate from that which admins and as separate from that which implements. And I know this is not a new idea in Auroville, That's the thing, we have always have ideas, but how much of it and where are we in that circle of reinventing something? So can we, do something which allows this to happen, that, L'avenir d'Auroville can actually be the future of Auroville, that does the envisioning, that allows all this participation to happen, to take forward everything, and helps us in the path rather than, creating impediments. So this is a very difficult topic, but we are still hopeful that if everything goes right and if Vastushilp is on board and the secretary is also supporting the fact that what we have agreed upon and that the ATDC is going to do what it has said, then we are still hopeful that some of these ideas will be taken forward, that there will be next steps to this, and we'll manage to go forward. But this is one of our problems, in Auroville in general. And this was also our fear when we started, that again this should not enter a drawer, one more report in the thousands of beautiful reports that we make, but really it should go forward. And we hope that it is the right moment.
The Southern Bench of the National Green Tribunal has directed the Auroville Foundation not to cut down any more trees for the Crown Road project until a joint committee, appointed by it, conducts an inspection of the planned site and submits a report. The NGT also directed the foundation to prepare a proper township plan and obtain environmental clearance before undertaking construction in the project area earmarked for establishing an international township.